Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here with Jason Blaha Strength and Fitness, and today I want to chat with you guys and gals a little bit about why you cannot completely separate size and strength. But a quick reminder, if you guys will please click like down below, be greatly appreciated. If you're not subscribed or following, please do so. And if you'll be kind enough to drop me a comment down below, I'd appreciate it so much. Thank you. Let's get over into this topic. It's a topic I'm very passionate about as someone who's a strength coach. I absolutely have to understand these things. And people will argue all that they want, but it's like, look, guys, oftentimes people hire me to get them a state record or national level platform for various strength sports. I don't have the luxury of getting this wrong. Let's be clear. Let us be clear. I do not have the luxury, if I want to have a successful business or to pay my bills, to get this one wrong. I don't have the luxury of that. Okay, like a lot of people out there, they can argue it. Your livelihood's not on the line. Like if you get this wrong, your bills get paid. Make sense? I can't afford to get it wrong. I'm someone with an interested party financially because the performance of my clients can make or break me. Not an option. So when we start looking at the history of this, the excuses people make, and then we look at the research, you realize very quickly there is no real credible argument against the overlap of size and strength for the individual, right? And I'm not saying from person to person there's not some differences, but I think what people forget is this has been pretty heavily researched, and there was at least one major study where they looked at really serious competitive powerlifters, like a national level event. And what they found is that they could tell where they were going to rank from a DEXA scan. In other words, their totals, like they took 10 powerlifters, and what they found is that the DEXA scan predicted how strong they were going to be relative to each other. That's how much of an overlap there is. In other words, it was all about just lean body mass. When they looked at their 10 raw totals in competition, like we're talking raw, no wraps, raw lifting, just a belt and wrist wraps, maybe some knee sleeves, okay? What they found is that their totals in that meet lined up in order with the amount of lean body mass they had. In other words, the person with the highest lean body mass had the best total. The person with the second highest amount of lean body mass had the number 2 total all the way down to number 10. I thought that was interesting. That was done to us. Actually, Schoenfeld and them were involved in that. Okay? That should be case closed if we go, oh, wait a minute. But people say, yeah, but they were all power lifters. They all had the neural drive. So therefore, since they were all power training, of course there's overlap. Okay, fair. And they'll say, well, how come this bodybuilder isn't stronger? Or they'll use examples of fake lifters. Like they'll use Anatoly, who lifts bumper plates and stuff. He's a sub 500 pound deadlifter for the most part. But even then, keeping in mind, it's not like he's at an elite strength level either. And he's still a ripped dude on a bit of gear. It's just covered up and so slimmer. But, again, and he also has guys on there with fake weights who are fake actors. Like all these jacked bodybuilders, like it's a parody. It's not real. Then you had the up powerlifter guy who I think all of us have realized was faking the bench stuff. There's good reason to think that he was faking it for a whole number of reasons. So people try to use these rare outliers to say, it's not true because this guy had this 415 bench or whatever at 155, blah, blah, right? Okay. Who refused to ever do it in a sanctioned event and faked prepping for one, keeping in mind he made tens of thousands of dollars in ad revenue on YouTube. He made a lot of money off of that fakery. Okay? You do understand that, right? Did anyone not get that? He was making money. YouTube was paying really good while he was doing that. It was the golden years. He made a lot of money. Right? That was all fakery. The reality is when you start looking at studies, we find that when leverages and technique are accounted for, there's almost 100% overlap. In other words, so when muscle growth is measured on, say, a single muscle or in isolation on a machine, there's 100% carryover. In other words, if they lock your bicep or your leg, like your leg or your arm into a machine and measure your strength, like how much weight can you move, is all out with completely isolated joint. Like they lock you into a preacher curl type device where you're strapped down and you can only move the elbow. No way to cheat. Or they lock the leg down and you can only do a knee extension. It's 100% carryover. Meaning there's 100% absolute perfect correlation between muscle growth and muscle size and how much weight you can move locked in. Okay? So on an individual muscle level, it's almost 100% overlap between size and strength. Right? So any variation generally beyond that usually involves coordination, other than maybe a few genetic freaks. Tiny percentage with some neural drive stuff happening. By and large, all that other stuff is about coordination and structure and leverages. In other words, different people are going to have different favorable leverages with insertion points, arm and leg lengths and ratios are going to affect all of this stuff, how far they're moving the weight, how well they leverage it. But at the tendon level, the muscle pulling against the tendon, it's all muscle mass. It's all size. Okay? It's all size. It's literally almost everything. It's like 99%. All right, now, do the neural drive and other stuff on the big movements matter? Well, because there's coordination. In other words, people who train only on machines and isolate, they're not as coordinated. That is true. People who don't do really heavy, like 1 to 3 rep stuff, they're not as coordinated. That's true. But it's worth less than you think it is. We're talking like maybe 10, 15%. Okay? Do we understand this? It's like 10 to 15%. Now, does that matter? Oh, heck yeah, it matters. I mean, you're talking about the difference between 500 pounds and maybe 580 or 570, 560. Okay? 550 to 575 versus 500. That's significant. But it's still dependent on the muscle mass. And then they'll say, well, how come this bodybuilder's not so? But then they are when they actually try to lift heavy. I saw that before with Kai Green. He's like, I'm a bodybuilder, not a weightlifter, and I don't care about blah, blah, blah. And people say, see, look, there you go. And he's so big and he's not strong. Till you see him incline bench. And then you realize his incline bench was absolutely monstrously elite. Anytime he did grab a really big weight, an incline bench or get on a leg machine, you're like, dude's over here doing hack squats with 600 pounds on the hack squat machine for high reps. He's incline benching 405 for reps. He was insanely strong while still saying this stuff. Context. Also keep in mind, bodybuilders have oftentimes a lot of fake muscle, a lot of side injections, a lot of synthol, all that stuff, and then it's still illusion. They'll be like, well, how come they're not as strong as this big power lifter or strong man? But they look bigger till you see them next to them, and then you realize, oh, they're just fat without all the show muscles. They just aren't ripped, the big strong man, and they're not injecting tons of stuff into their biceps. Biceps are probably still as big, actual muscle, there's just no oil in it. Okay? Oh, well, that makes sense. And the perfect example, I think, that highlights it. Remember when you guys saw Brian Shaw next to those Olympia guys? They looked like children next to him. But people would look at him in a picture and go, well, how come Jay Cutler isn't stronger than Brian Shaw? He's bigger, but he's not. Brian Shaw was way bigger. He just had more fat. And you realize, oh, wait, he's like 1.5 feet taller and 200 pounds heavier. He's bigger. Bodybuilders are all short. They're borderline midgets. They even fake the height they put up for them. Like, they're 5'8". They're really not. They're 5'5" or 5'6" when you meet them. Right? They're pretty much midgets in the open bodybuilding. So they're not as big as you think. They're not saying they're not really big. They may not be as big as you think they are compared to this big strength athlete. You might look at that big, fatter power lifter who's benching 700 pounds, and then you realize he's 6'2" and 400 pounds. Well, he's bigger than them. Okay? So think about this in terms of your training. There's an enormous overlap. In other words, training for strength will get you bigger. Doing other hypertrophy work stuff will get you stronger. We have to understand this as lifters and coaches. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.